I'm Lovely's mom, also known as Stacked and Stupid, and this is the March recap of playing and ranking 100 games from the past 30 years. Here is the current ranking. A whopping 24 games. This month I beat these 9 games from 2004 to 2006. Timestamps are in the description if you want to skip around, but you'll be a good girl and watch the whole video, right? I'm going to talk about them in fairly roundabout ways, no spoilers, just how the game starts, its gameplay loop, and any outstanding thoughts I had on it. Without further ado, 2004! Sacred is an action RPG developed by Ascaron and published by Take-Two Interactive for PC. I chose it because it looked like a fun top-down RPG. The opening cutscene is short and sweet. A mage summons a demon, but the ritual went wrong and the demon got out. The world is in danger. Sacred's gameplay is extremely similar to Diablo. In case you're unfamiliar, you use your mouse to move and fight hordes of enemies. It's that simple. Kill stuff, get loot in service of building up your character to kill and loot more efficiently. There are enough pieces of Sacred that differentiate it from Diablo at a deeper level, but not in the moment-to-moment killing. Sacred's differentiation comes from a more standard fantasy world, many more quests, how you progress your character builds, the hotbar, and horses, of course. The world of Sacred is standard sword and sorcery. To my memory, I never came across anything that stood out as unique, except maybe your choice in player character. The bulk of quests you may take on in any of many towns are simple killing, escorting, or retrieving. I did come across a quest I finished early once due to some exploration, and one that involved a simple version of stealth, but I don't blame the developers that the majority of quests are the simple variety, due to the amount they had to make. For all the quests and tomes that can be found, I can't help but think that I simply did not spend time and immerse myself in the world to see its depth. I wonder if I looked harder if I'd have found a more interesting world. The biggest standout to make Sacred unique was its ability and combo system, and to a lesser degree the hotbars that accompany it. Your abilities as a character are not improved by gaining levels and putting points into them. Instead, you get items that level the ability up. Furthermore, you are not incentivized to use them as soon as you find them. When an ability is upgraded, its cooldown increases. So, if an ability is a buff that lasts 30 seconds and has a 30-second cooldown, upgrading it could increase the power of the buff and duration to 32 seconds, but the cooldown would go up to 35 seconds. While leveling, your stats increase and cooldowns decrease, so that 35-second cooldown creeps back down to 30. You can also go to a wizard to put your abilities into a combo. If you have a move that dashes into combat and another that does big damage at close range, you can activate both those abilities at the same time with the same button. Combos are further complicated, however, because if you create a combo with an ability, then level the ability up, the ability in the combo will stay at the level it was when the combo was created. I used this to great effect with the Demon class. You get the ability to fly, and by creating a combo at level 1 with just that ability, the cooldown matches the level 1 cooldown. If you reactivate the ability, you can smash into the ground, with damage scaling to its level. Using 2 hotbar slots, you can use the combo version to fly with a low cooldown, and use the higher level ability directly to deal damage without the longer cooldown. So, aside from abilities and combos that can go on one side of your hotbar, you can have an equal number of weapons on the other side, which isn't overly impactful, at least in the vanilla version of the game. Technically, there are systems in place that incentivize using different weapons on different enemy types and under different circumstances, but it never seemed like a big deal as I played. As I understand it, there is a Sacred Reborn mod, which rebalances those strengths and weaknesses to make weapon swapping more important, but for the first time through, I wasn't worried about it. I think the most peculiar part of Sacred are the horses. Peculiar because, on its face, it's a good idea. Sacred's map is pretty big, and riding a horse to speed around it makes sense. There's a big but, however. Most magic-using enemies have a route spell, so you can't ride your horse between towns without being accosted by enemies and stopped in your tracks. And if you try to run, you'll just acquire a larger group of goons, which contains more mages, which will route you even more. So, it seems like a good idea hampered by a different system. 2 other quick side notes. I went through periods of using almost no health potions to guzzling them like no tomorrow, but maybe I was just geared bad or played bad. Then, as the demons, some of my buffs would cause the game to turn into a slideshow. I lived with this until I figured out that swapping weapons would bring my FPS back. Neither of these are a big deal, just interesting. Sacred slaughtered its way to number 16. While Loot Stravaganza games don't keep my attention, they do still hold my interest for a while. If it were a bit stronger in the story or role-playing departments, it might have moved further up, but alas, maybe I'll play Sacred 2 and be pleasantly surprised. Cave Story is a Metroidvania developed by Daisuke Pixel Amaya, self-published for PC. I picked it because it seems like an iconic game that I've just never touched. The story opens with a scientist, trapped, sending messages to his sister. Meanwhile, we wake up in a cave. The opening is just that simple. The gameplay is a lot of what you'd expect for a 2004 independent Metroidvania. If that sounds negative, it is not in the slightest. You've got some running and jumping and shooting, along the way getting a couple of upgrades that change how you shoot and jump. I didn't know what to expect mechanically aside from that, but was pleasantly surprised by the weapon level up mechanic. When you defeat enemies, they drop XP to level the weapons up to a max of 3, but taking damage loses that XP and lose enough, and the weapon's level lowers. The whole system felt meaningful but not overly punishing for getting hit here and there. I don't have a lot to say about Cave Story. It's a competently built and extremely charming Metroidvania that is short, sweet, and to the point. It has a couple of endings that range from easy to get bad, the normal good, and going above and beyond for a secret ending. Delving into subtext could be fun, but it's not within the purview of this video. I think my one gripe with the game was the movement and camera. At times they can be a bit wonky when looking back and forth. I felt like the camera adjusted too much. And then the movement and jumping could be a bit slippy to me. I think that is closer to a personal preference thing than a bad design, though. Cave Story rocket boots up to 5th. I'm a sucker for a good Metroidvania. It's just so complete, and not too many flaws buoys it up the list away, and the good story, music, and pixel art just kept it climbing the ladder.
You guys are roast chicken.
Great work, President, but you still have a delicious dessert coming.
Metal Wolf Chaos is a third-person shooter developed and published by From Software for Xbox. I chose it because I'm the President of the United States of America. The game opens with a coup d'etat for control of the United States by the Vice President. The only one that can stop him and his army is Michael Wilson, the President of the United States of America, last time, in his mech suit, Metal Wolf. Gameplay is quite simple. It's a third-person shooter split into missions. The unique aspect of the game is picking 8 guns from a large arsenal, 4 on each arm, some taking 2 slots. It doesn't have the bizarre controls of early Armored Core or the fast-paced, well-polished sheen of later entries. It's kinda just a third-person shooter. I think in terms of things on my list currently, this and Robot Alchemic Drive are similar. Both play on a surreal version of reality. But where Metal Wolf Chaos is turning many of the typical third-person shooter or United States dials up to 11 ridiculousness, Rad is creating different, strange dials. I'm no stranger or disliker of over-the-top games. I enjoy a good Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, Devil May Cry, Bulletstorm, etc. But this one didn't gel with me. Like other over-the-top games, the story is just as silly as the gameplay, but for the other games I mentioned, the gameplay is also a blast. Here, not so much. You're also kind of fragile. I felt like a mostly unstoppable super president, but that mostly was a big sticking point. I was glad it was short and mostly sweet. The large arsenal in this game offers the same drawbacks as others of its ilk. You will be deceived by what you think is cool. Sadly, cool does not a good murder weapon make. I was deceived. My own fault, really. Funny enough, the other comparison I have is to Yu-Gi-Oh! The Duelists of the Roses. There's a pretty short list of levels, and you'll be replaying them if you want enough money to unlock all of the weapons. Metal Wolf Chaos presidents its way up to 18th. It did enough fun or interesting things to get it way up the ladder, but it's still just underneath the quirky and bizarre veneer of Americana is a pretty bog-standard third-person shooter. 2005. Cute Knight is a casual life sim RPG developed by Hanako Games and published by iWin for PC. I picked it because it looked cute. Cute Knight starts with a fairy telling you you've got 3 years to get your act together to find out what you want to do for the rest of your life. The gameplay loop is one I'm not overly familiar with, but picked up quickly. You are shown a small map of a town with a number of activities to choose from. When you pick one, your character does that for the week. Your stats increase and sometimes decrease based on what you choose. Your options range from stocking shelves, socializing, working with the horses at church, or even adventuring in a dungeon. Along the way, events trigger and you meet various characters. From there, you can try to trigger more events to deepen your relationships with them. The dungeon exploration is of the old-school crawling variety. For a newer point of reference, think Legend of Grimrock. There is an interesting side effect of this adventuring. When you kill monsters, that counts as a sin, with its own stat and everything. If you engage in too much wanton murder in the dungeon, you are excluded from the town. You can either engage in charitable acts to lower your sin enough to return, or find less scrupulous methods of re-entry. I want to talk briefly about my 3 playthroughs to give you an idea of how different they were each time. The first playthrough, I was determined to delve the dungeon and be an adventurer. I realize now, after having done 2 other runs, my mistakes, but this entire run I was poor. In between going to the dungeon and getting obliterated, I was always doing the lowest value work of moving boxes at the store to stay afloat. That might sound negative, but I was obsessed with this cute knight that was arguably a terrible adventurer. But don't worry, she did get a happy ending. The second, I opted for being a charming church/horse girl. Most days I'd be with the horses or at the library. Turns out, working with horses lowers your charm, stinky girl. And I needed charm, so I took dance classes, which also raise your luck. This run, I found out about how different activities could have events trigger that were able to interact with each other. I also found out busking makes good money. Probably not applicable in real life. The ending I got was one that charmed me. It involved taking the place of a character who was missing, but from my previous playthrough, I knew where they were. I really liked that sense of lateral knowledge progression. The third playthrough, I initially wanted a go at crafting and charm. Rather quickly, I turned to a life of crime. And girl, howdy does crime pay! I also had soft aspirations of dance, but thievery called to me. I think there were 2 ending potentials here, and I opted for one over the other, but I'm not sure. Overall, I only did 3 playthroughs, got 3 endings out of 50, but I enjoyed each and every one. Also, the music was incredibly bugged. The first time I played it, it never even started, and then after that, when a song ended, it did just one droning note, but wouldn't stop, and new songs would begin, so eventually it just became this cacophonous, ominous buzzing. Great stuff. Cute Night charmed its way up to 6th place. This whole game was just a lot. Silly, cute, interesting systems working alongside each other. Great.
What the hell's going on here? Why am I shooting at crazed beasts just to survive?
There's no easy answer, Kurt. I know what assignment you were sent on, but there are no rebels here. Copy that? No political conflict either. What we got here are genetically modified animals, which was set free.
Vivisector, Beast Within, is a horror FPS developed by Action Forms and published by 1C Company for Windows. I picked it because it was an FPS and the name and cover were cool. The opening of this game is a small squad of troops being sent to an island to find a different squad of troops who went missing. Shortly after arriving, your squad is torn apart by lightning hyenas. The gameplay loop is shooting, a bit of platforming, and more shooting. I mean, it's a fast-paced boomer shooter, that's pretty much it. I had an interesting time with this game. It starts with being a more dangerous version of Cabela's Dangerous Hunts, if you're familiar with that game's specific brand of wanton animal slaughter. If you're unfamiliar, well, let's just say scores of lightning hyenas, fire-breathing leopards, and grenade-launching gorillas are just some of the monsters you face. Animals you face. All of those and more in obscene number and downright hostile spawn points. Once I was walking on a cliff edge when a handful of hyenas spawned directly in front of me, but I died to something else just instantly. On reloading the save, I spun around to find 2 grenade gorillas standing right behind me. There are a lot of enemy spawns like that, just downright mean. Weirdly, it takes a hard turn away from eradicating all wildlife into a kind of bland sci-fi shooter about halfway through. The guns you use are mostly good, though enemies can be a bit spongy. There are some bizarre additions, and not just the sci-fi ones. I'd love to know why a Tommy gun is here as the second weapon that uses pistol ammo. I did appreciate the fact that you get better versions of the weapons that use the same ammo, but they also just use more of that ammo. But it also lowers kill times, so still better? The story is Island of Dr. Moreau. It has twists and turns, but is mostly straightforward. But characters will also deliver lines that are trying to be so philosophically deep, but are hard to take seriously when you're gunning down invisible leopards by the dozen. I adore this game's willingness to just present itself to you without a hint of remorse. I'm past multiple things that were scenery that I would have thought would be worth mentioning in dialogue, or fought through deadly enemy spawns multiple times in a row. There are individual tidbits I could say that would feel like important things in other games that are just brushed past here. Vivisector, Beast Within, creates a monstrosity of man and beast at number 16. I put it in the awkward space between Zone of the Enders 1 and 2, which feels correct to me. While Vivisector was better than Zone 1, it's not as good as the polished second. If any footage has you curious, and you like fast-paced shooting with a bizarre story, I encourage you to check it out. It's on Abandonware with a repack to make it easily playable on modern hardware. Also, it was weirdly reminiscent to me of Metal Garden. I think some of the large, low-contrast environments and structures combined with killing lion people reminded me of it.
Moorhead, what are you doing? Oh my god, it's a baby! A human baby! Hold on there. Are you crazy? Have you forgotten why you, the science expert, were banished from England? I'll remind you. For experimenting with animals, Professor. That's what you're here for, damn it. I didn't bring you here to experiment on people. This has gone way too far. I'm taking him with me. Back to the mainland.
Killer 7 is an action-adventure game developed by Grasshopper Manufacture and Capcom, and published by Capcom for GameCube and PlayStation 2. I picked it because it's a Grasshopper Manufacture game I've heard enough buzz about to be curious. The opening premise is... well, it doesn't say a lot about the game, but it opens with a man with a large suitcase, Garcian Smith, walking down the street and passing an informant and handler for Garcian. You are instructed to clear out the hideout of some people called Heaven Smiles, and also the source of the smiles. I didn't do that explanation justice, but it's a noir game, and there are a lot of moving pieces, most of which only reveal themselves as you go. Wikipedia compared the game to Myst and Snatcher, but I'd say Resident Evil. There's a lot more shooting here than in Myst. But in general, within a level, you have to solve a couple of puzzles using items found or various members of Killer 7 to get to your target. Then a boss fight, which is usually more gimmick than test of skills. The big distinctions between this and Resident Evil are both an on-rails element of map traversal and arcade style of shooting. Though I guess Resident Evil does that too, huh? But still, you'll be picking up objects and using abilities to do things. I'll start right off the bat by saying I did not click with this game. As I write this, I think more fondly of it, but I was nearing my wit's end in the playing of it. Interestingly, the only other Grasshopper game I've touched, No More Heroes, I also did not click with. I tentatively want to play Romeo is a Dead Man, their newest release. From what I know of Grasshopper, all of their games are offbeat in a way that I enjoy conceptually, but I don't know if I enjoy the playing of. Admittedly, I currently only have a sample size of 2. I think my frustrations with Killer 7 were exacerbated initially by being underfed or tired the first time I played it. Let me lay down thy threefold sins, Killer 7. Firstly, the smiles. The primary enemy move quite fast, and the points for hitting them are quite precise, which typically I can deal with. But most members of Killer 7 have aim sway. Fairly minor aim sway, but aim sway nonetheless. Now this can be chalked up to individuals that are more professional, having steadier aims, but when the kill points are so small, it felt frustrating to miss shots. Secondly, puzzles. Some obvious, some less so. I think my frustration with puzzles came from a general lack of patience for the game, which meant that I was generally less interested in solving them myself. They even let you know when you're around a puzzle with a music stinger. What got my goat was needing to use specific characters' abilities that I did not previously know of. This leads me to my third issue. There is a person that you can find along the map, and in the safe room that you can talk to. Iwazaru. Real name, Vincel del Boris V. Zazarskov, who is kinda like your hint fairy. But he is long-winded, and in the opening minutes of the game you have the opportunity to sit through a couple dozen explanations that in another game would be a simple text entry. But here, Iwazaru starts most dialogues with a, "Master, we're in a tight spot, a very tight spot," and ends with a, "In the name of Harmon," which takes up a lot of time when you're going through a dozen messages. Textually, brilliant. And the shot composition, great. Sitting through that for every single tutorial or lore message really grated on me. I think the Iwazaru problem is emblematic of what makes it hard for me to connect to Grasshopper games. They want to connect as many pieces as they can between theme, gameplay, and presentation. And I appreciate the intention, but not the playing of it. Also, infinitely respawning enemies. I loathed whenever I'd have to backtrack for a puzzle. Killer 7 killed its way to 20th. I really wanted to like Killer 7, and while I did appreciate the story, art, and music, and the many times my character would say, "You're fucked," after a crit, I just didn't like it more than Sacred. 2006. Dark Messiah of Might and Magic is a first-person action RPG developed by Arcane Studios and published by Ubisoft for PC and Xbox 360. I picked it because it's got a kick to it. The opening premise is that as Sereth, an apprentice to the wizard Fenrig, you have collected the Shantiri crystal and must deliver it to another wizard, Menelag, and search for the Skull of Shadows. You are set on a simple adventure with relatively few twists and turns, where you kick and maim your enemies to accomplish your goals. I'm not versed in the Might and Magic universe, but there were a couple of lore tidbits that were interesting. Gameplay is quite variable, but in large scope you face adversaries as you collect your MacGuffins. There are 3 paths to develop your character, I'd say: fighter, mage, and rogue, though you're certainly not stopped from mixing and matching. I do wish that when you acquired skill points, your health went up a little rather than needing to spend skill points for it, but it's not that big of a deal. Regardless of which skills you unlock, everyone has the most important one: kick. If you know this game already, you probably know it for its kicking, and it is a truly inspired kick. Though at times I found it a tad underwhelming. Mostly it was a blast, giving my enemies the boot and watching them fly away from me into harm. My granddog Gerald loved kicking enemies. One aspect I was unaware of, right up until opening an options menu, was that this is a Source Engine game, same as Valve games and things like Titanfall and Stanley Parable. Once I knew it was a Source game, I really saw the telltale signs just about everywhere. Which isn't an indictment. It's a fine engine. It just has its telltale quirks in a "oh, that makes sense" way. While the story is a simple adventure, I don't think Arcane's intent was on a complex story. At least I hope not. I haven't played their previous and first game, Arx Fatalis, but I have played many of their later games, and I can see this as a simpler version of their tighter level design later on. A good amount of sections were necessarily linear, but segments here and there widen out into a playground space where you can explore different ways of doing things. Admittedly, those different ways benefit most from stealth, so it makes sense their next big follow-up was Dishonored, which really fine-tunes both level design and stealth mechanics, and it has an interesting story. No kick, though. Sereth, the main character, is dense. Or maybe he is just so bright that he never saw any of the foreshadowing. The only thing that makes Sereth's lack of character funnier is how flat everyone else is, at least in character depth. Out of necessity, Sereth can't say anything definitively good or evil until you make the choice that determines the ending, but that means while Xana is hitching a ride, she'll suggest something obscenely evil and Sereth will just hit her with a, maybe. Dark Messiah of Might and Magic kicks its way to the number 9th spot, right above KOTOR. And I'm not sure how much of that had to do with the fun factor of Dark Messiah and bias against Star Wars universe, but the overall appreciation of Dark Messiah won out. What can I say? Mother 3 is an RPG developed by Brownie Brown and HAL Laboratory and published by Nintendo, but criminally kept only on the Game Boy Advance as a Japan-only release. The opening of the game is a simple affair. You wake up in bed as Lucas, or whatever you named him, and spend an idle day at your grandpa's house with your mom and brother. During the course of this day, they'll teach you the basics of movement and combat. As the day ends, your mother sends a letter to your father that they will all be back home soon. There are some complications, however. Something is setting the forest ablaze. Mother 3's gameplay is mostly standard turn-based RPG fare. Every turn in combat, you pick your actions and watch them play out. However, 2 elements make it stand out. If you choose to do a physical attack, you can continue tapping the A button to land subsequent hits. Your timing for these taps is based on the rhythm of the music and the enemy. If your timing is good enough, you can land up to 16 additional hits. The other unique element is its health displays. Portraying health as tickers and treating them as such means when you take damage or heal, it takes time for the game to catch up, as it were. This means characters can take fatal damage, but until the ticker reaches 0, you can still take turns and perform actions, enabling you to bring your characters back from the brink. These traits incentivize being involved with the combat during the round and during the action selection. It's like a different evolution of the active time battle of Final Fantasy to me. Some of the enemies even play with these combat quirks and have bizarre rhythms or moves that necessitate ending combat as fast as possible before you can take all of the mortal damage. At times, these pieces fall by the wayside as you fight common enemies, but you still can and do have to utilize them on occasion. My Mother 3 knowledge began and ended with Smash Bros. And people saying they should translate Mother 3. Outside of that, I was in the dark. I had played some, if not most, of Earthbound a long time ago, so I can't remember the details, so I was only vaguely prepared for what was on offer here. The first things I learned of Mother 3 were its Smash Bros. Stages, which humorously led me to recognizing the occasional enemy or environment. Shoutouts to Mr. Saturn, my goat. While I have gone into games with a similar level of knowledge, it is strange to osmose knowledge of a game you had no ability to experience yourself. That lack of ability falls squarely on the shoulders of Nintendo. Though many have and will continue to shout into the corporate void that is Nintendo to localize this game, I don't believe they will. There are a touch too many elements in Mother 3 that didn't age well. Even setting those aside, of the games Nintendo publishes today, Mother 3's message is too bold and anti-corporate for them to endorse it as a release. They will not translate Mother 3. Play the fan translation. The amazing and wonderful fans that translated did a fantastic job. Shout out to mother3.fabi.net. Even if Nintendo released it tomorrow for free, I'm not going to give them my goodwill. They don't deserve it. The profits from Mother 3 wouldn't even be benefiting its original developers. Who's wearing the pig masks now? I don't think there needs to be corporate involvement in this case. It says all that it needs saying that a small, dedicated group has done more to support a piece of artwork for more people to experience than Nintendo has. A company whose whim to translate and bring Mother 3 to modern systems would represent a monetary drop in the bucket. You may have heard me mention that Nintendo won't translate Mother 3 because of what's in the game and thought, well, that doesn't sound right. Isn't it just an RPG for kids? Yes and no. Anything for younger audiences can be crafted well enough for adults, too. I think I can make a good comparison with food. I enjoy a complex meal that does interesting things with flavors and spice and has veggies and all that jazz, whatever. Sometimes I just want some vegan nuggets, you know? But just because I'm eating cheap nuggets doesn't mean I want them to be made of food waste. I'll taste the difference. Even though a kid might not, doesn't mean you should feed them the food waste nuggets. I was told this comparison didn't make sense, so let's try to sum it up in a sentence. There should be good stepping stones for kids to appreciate things that have more depth. Other things that I don't really have long sections for. I was not prepared for how funny Mother 3 is. It is extremely consistent with humor and charm factor across visual, audio, and writing elements. The game's soundtrack is fantastic. The one that has been an earworm is the pig mask motif, but the whole OST is fantastic. Between original music, throwbacks to previous entries, and the usage of classical music, Mother 3 bops. I mentioned the music is used in gameplay, but both elements kind of make each other better. Mother 3 is chock-a-block with cute little friends, ignoring the fact some are trying to kill you. Even in the overworld, sprites are just cute as heck. The save frogs? Outstanding. Rope snake? Perfect. Mole crickets? Little friends. The environments are also charming, and some areas display some impressive work in making the spaces feel ominous. Before I rate it, I want to bring up a couple of those poorly aged elements I mentioned earlier. There is only one named black character, Reggie. Then there are well, I'm not calling them that, let's call them magpies instead. And they are just trans-misogynistic stereotypes. I hate that this beautiful, wonderful game has these at all. I'm not going into these details past bringing them up, but if I'm going to talk about a loaf of bread that has mold in it, even if I removed the visibly moldy bits, it's still got mold all the way through. You might say, why don't they just bake the bread without mold? Or, I don't think that's actually mold. On the latter, you need to re-examine your biases and the world around you more heavily. On the former, I don't think you can. Or even if it doesn't have mold I'm sensitive to, someone else might taste it and go, oh, this is rancid. Like cilantro, even though that's soap. Is this comparison getting away from me? Anyway, I slice it. It is with conflict in my heart, as Mother 3 PK Blubblies the entire list and takes the top spot as the new greatest game of all time. I think from the opening hours, I knew it was going to be at least number 2. Through my playtime, that stayed true. But as the credits rolled, I was faced with a dilemma. Is it better than Moon Remix RPG Adventure? What brought it home to number 1 wasn't any one standout thing that scored higher or lower to make my determination. I would say that my answer would change on any given day if someone asked me which of the two they should play, though the real answer is both. So maybe by the end of April, I'll change my mind again. Who knows? I think this also goes to show that 2 entries on the list can be ranked by a razor-thin margin or be leaps and bounds from each other, and that a game is the sum of its parts, and nothing is perfect. At least we can be thankful that Working Designs didn't translate Mother 3. Ugh. Ōkami is an action-adventure game developed by Clover Studio and published by Capcom for PlayStation 2 and Nintendo Wii. And despite Clover Studio closing shortly after its release, it has been updated as Ōkami HD and released for PlayStation 3, Windows, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and Nintendo Switch. I picked it because it's one of those games you always hear people praising, and between that and the gorgeous art style, it was an easy sell. The lengthy opening cutscene tells us the tale of Shiranui and Nagi, a wolf and man who defeated an evil demon Orochi, who demanded a yearly sacrificial maiden. After its defeat, Shiranui was memorialized as a statue in the terrorized Kamiki village. 100 years later, Orochi is gaining power again, so, as Amaterasu, the reincarnation of Shiranui, you must stop him. The gameplay is highly comparable to a Zelda game. You run around an open-ish world and help people, go into dungeons, get new abilities, and the like. The combat is based in time attack. Defeat a set of enemies, and based on your time and how much damage you take, you get a reward of yen. The standout feature of its gameplay, however, is the usage of the Celestial Brush. With a simple button press, you pause the world into parchment, onto which you paint your magical abilities. These techniques have a variety of uses in both puzzles and combat, but I found them most useful for the former. The puzzles are pretty simple. The platforming was at times obtuse. In fact, because of the art style, I could not tell where I was going to land, which led me to jumping short, though I mostly stopped doing this after a bit. In terms of game, along the lines of Zelda, this one brings a little more depth to combat, but not much elsewhere. The real draw to Ōkami is its art. It's the first thing you'll see or hear about the game from those squawking about it.
Those graphics, sis.
And they are, indeed, truly stunning. Between the cell shading in the game parts and the cutaways to more traditional art, it's a feast for the eyes. Not only is it a joy to look at, but to listen to as well. The game's soundtrack dovetails beautifully with the visuals to form a cohesive vision. Ōkami also gets points for its setting, not Japan specifically, but portraying its collection of gods and folktales. I've always felt drawn, at least aesthetically, to polytheistic religions. Many different gods ranging from beneficial to capricious feels more correct to the world to me than to attribute all happenings to a single entity. Amaterasu is the only god we're truly focused on here, but with the addition of folktale elements, it steeps itself well in mythology. Ōkami paints itself in the number 7th... Oh, wait, where is it? Down there, pointerly? That can't be right, but... No, there it is, in the 22nd spot. How'd it get there? Oh, wait, what's that? Zoom and enhance. Oh, right. Isun single-handedly hamstrings Ōkami to 22nd place. That seems unfair, you might say. It's only one character. Can it be that bad? Yes. Yeah, it's that bad. His 3 character traits are stupid, annoying, and perverted. I am a firm believer that removing Isun from Ōkami would have resulted in a much better game. Which is impressive. A single character making a game significantly worse? I don't think I've said that about a game before. I've been complaining about Isun, but not the specifics, so why don't I talk about my problems with the insect? Isun will chime in for every action and movement you do. If you get a new brush technique, he will tell you how and when to use it. Enter a new area, you better believe he'll have opinions on what you should be doing. Mess up an input? Isun. If you cut out Isun's dialogue, you could probably remove at least an hour or 2 from the game. Such is his long-windedness. I will concede that it isn't just Isun who treats you as an idiot. Picking up any item will always bring up a text box, both telling you what it is and what it does every single time. But Isun is the developer, always whispering in your ear what you should be doing. Just let me be a cool wolf god. Jeez, Mom. Isun's perverted nature may be seen as simply a comedic shtick to some, but those people are probably just as likely to parrot what Isun says to women's faces behind their backs because they don't actually talk to women. I realize that this extends past Isun. The characters he harasses are designed to elicit his reaction. But here's the thing. There's a moment when a character with certain...
And she's like, stacked.
features comes on screen. And Amaterasu is stunned, which is a really funny emotion for a wolf to display. Funny even if Amaterasu were male, because it's a dog. But Isun immediately interrupts that moment with, "Dang, She's stacked. Sorry if you think I'm looking at your melons, because I am. I have never met an endearing pervert man, nor will I. He's just harassing women. Is that too, Tim Rogers? I reiterate that there is not a single instance of Isun being strictly necessary to any cutscene. When people respond to what Isun says, their wording just needs to be changed. When he has plot relevance, you could have fetched different MacGuffins or even a temporary character. Even in the final moments of the game, when he arguably plays the most key role, I can lay out exactly how you didn't need him. Pause here for a spoiler explanation of how that would work. This tactless flea ruined Ōkami for me. Clearly not enough to rank it last or anything, there are still many elements that make it somewhat worth playing. Other issues I had were the reuse of some bosses too many times, not enough map elements to be able to check where I was supposed to go. The story itself was also nothing to write home about. Some relatively minor things that made the game still fall a little flatter. I could compare it to Mother 3. That game also had characters I found distasteful. The tremendous difference is that Mother 3's characters didn't test me every time they came up. There was more nuance. It's also comparable in that both games skew towards a younger audience, with Mother 3 being infinitely more respectful of a kid's knowledge. I could also compare Ōkami to Killer 7, which it sits right below. Killer 7's gameplay definitely tried me at times, but the story's complexity and intrigue kept my interest a lot more than Ōkami's. Towards the end, when the game was firmly cemented where it would land in the list, I almost quit. Then I watched Tim Rogers talk about it. He'd played the first 10 hours 3 times and never beat it. In that moment, I knew I must complete the game. This one's for you. It didn't get better. I was born stupid. I will not die hungry. Video games forever. Blubbly. So, yeah. Amaterasu forever. Put Isun in the trash. This month, I ranged from indie to niche to AA. I think a fun part of this project is illustrating that it really doesn't take an enormous dev team or buckets of money to make a great game, or even guarantee that your game will come out great. Honestly, even from second last on the list up, I wouldn't call any of them objectively bad games. They might just not be my cup of tea. Also, that a well-crafted game need not be tied down by its genre contemporaries. We've got RPG, anti-RPG, immersive sim, point-and-click adventure, and mecha fighting games in the top 5 spots. While games that I heard parroted as good are near the top, there are a number of games I hear praise for that didn't have much on offer for me. Then there are the surprises like Robot Alchemic Drive or Cute Night, which I expected to be joke picks that turned out great. I ended the last video by revealing a handful of games I'd play next time, which included 2007 picks of The Darkness, Stalker, Shadow of Chernobyl, and Eternal Sonata. I didn't quite hit 07, but I do have news on that front. The Darkness has been replaced with Reciteer in Item Shop's Tale, which I did roll credits on yesterday as of recording, but I'm not finished with, because there's still post-game stuff, so not rating it here. And I also pluck away at Stalker, usually until it crashes. Old school RuneScape Leagues is approaching on the horizon of April. I'll inevitably be into that for a good chunk of time, so I'm not sure how much progress I'll make on the 100. Of course, there is also the element of games on the list increasing in time to beat estimates. Partially revealing 2008's games, the trio contains Mighty Jill Off, a short, tough platformer, My World, My Way, a DS Princess RPG, and the one I'll leave as a surprise, whose time to beat estimate sits at a whopping 67 hours. Nice. 2009's picks I'll happily reveal in full as Fragile Dreams, Farewell Ruins of the Moon, Cursed Mountain, and Machinarium. That's all for now, folks. Thanks for watching.